Mesachas Nedarim daf nun ches. The Gemara says, Kol davar sheyesh lo matirin, koin tevel, maaser sheni, hekdish v'chodosh, lo yinosnu bo chacham shir for the batul. Reb Shimon Shayosher says, you see from this Gemara, the midaraisa hekdish is batul, and he asks a tremendous kasha on that it's muvu in the Gemara. In the end of Beya, the Memonah loy batul. So he asks, how could it be that the hekdish should be batul since the hekdish is moment hekdish? How could it be batul b'roiv midaraisa? So Shimon says the answer to this kash is that the moment is and the reshus moment is definitely not batul, and the whole discussion over here is the garbage that din iser. Ein the shir in Beya daf lamed ches that we brought from the Shav Shmaitza that discusses the Shaila from places in Me'ilat Mavur, and there is a bit on hekdish, and the Shmaitza says a tremendous yisoid that the takeaway from hekdish is not considered a reshus moment, and it's not as if you're taking away from a moment that's in a reshus. And he brings a raya from the sugya in Yivam Stav Peiches, which you mentioned the Shir Yivam Stav Peiches, that even a decha there's nemon to moitzi from hekdish. And if it's a real reshus moment, biyode to be liftois is not going to help. So you see that has a status like a itzos iser and not of a itzos moment. The Chayy can be moisif on the teretz of the Shmaitza. According to a tremendous yisoid, which mentioned briefly in the Shir Daf Mem Beis from the Shiuri and Talmud, the Shiuri and Talmud proves so many rayas that it's choluk, the Rishus hekdish and Rishus moment be'ahedyet be'iki yisoid gidro. That by Rishus hekdish, it's not the pshat that you makne the chayfetz legavoya b'chlal, rather you matvis Hashem hekdish on the chefza and memela the chefza as dini moment hekdish. And he says it's not like Reb Chaim, the Borber brings from Reb Chaim that bekotche bedekabai is you makne b'kinyono legavoya, rather even bekotche bedekabai is the ikr Shem hekdish is atfosa of kedusha and the gufa cheftzem and meilo. It becomes moment hekdish, but it's not transferring the kinyan moment mitzad the ikechleis hekdish. And he brings a raya from the fact that the Gemara learns out from a pasuk, my basis shaloi, afkol shaloi. Without a pasuk, you'll be able to be makdish something that doesn't belong to you. And he brings another tremendous raya to this yisoid from the fact that the Rambam says the same way a husband or the father could be made for nidre iser who din, he could be made for nidre hekdish. And it's tzorich and gadol when the wife or the daughter is makdish, an object, lugavoya becomes moment hekdish. And that for his chal is only mikan la'abo, and it's not oiker the Nedarim ikara. So when he's made for the Nedarim, batul the Nedarim mikan la'abo, the chayfetz of hekdish should become hefker. And that's a dover shalimatzinu b'chlal, that since it's pocket which was hekdish, the chayfetz should be hefker. It's mashma clearly that goes back to the daughter, to the wife, the item that's hekdish, and it's tzorchi and according to Reb Chaim, since he was makne the chayfetz b'kinyoni legavoya, then after that fora has to go back to the daughter's rishus. So he says, akochi, you see that the ikechaleis hekdish is a chalois hatfosas is on the gufa chefetz, and mainly becomes moment hekdish since it's batul. The isa hekdish, the chayfetz goes back to the rishus of the daughter and the rishus of the wife. So according to the Yina Talmud, that's the beer in the Shmaitza, that the reason why you don't say Memonah loy batul by hekdish is because the ikeh kinyan is not a kinyan of momentness, rather it's a chalois hatfosas is a memelitz chal, the momentness, and therefore you don't say Memonah loy batul. Moving further on, the Gemara says, Hashvias ein lo matirim v'lo yinosnu bo chacham shir. The Tanan Hashvias haoseres kol shu b'mino. That means if you have a gidul of shishis that grew on shvias, the fact that it was mutaisiv on shvias asers, even though it was mutaisiv only a kol shu. So the Gemara means to prove that over here you see when the fact that the gidul on shvias asers akoch, you see the gidul's not ke'iker, and therefore when there's a gidul on shminis that continued from the gidul on shvias, the gidul on shminis will be mevatel the ikar that grew on shvias. And the Ran asked, that's very hard to understand, what's the Gemara's comparison with these two halachas? Although you see over here that the gidul on shvias asers, the gidul on shishis, that's because the gidul on shvias is independent gidul and it's aser, and it's not nisbatel with the shishis. However, if you have a gidul on Shvius, there was no Tosef on Shminis, Meichetesi, that since you see over here that the giduls, it's independent chashivas, that therefore when you have a Shvius that grew into Shminis, it should be mutter. So the Ran says, Al-Koch, you see, from this sugya, like his Yisoid, like mentioned before in the Shir and Afn Zayin, that the Gemara Sofik is not the Gabi Hilchas Batul. Rather, the Gemara Sofik is, if the gidul is its independent gidul, independent halachas, or it's part of the ikr. And if the gidul on Shminis, it's an independent gidul, therefore Mamela it's batul. So therefore, it's also hative that the Gemara is comparing over here, that since you see what's Godal, and what was the Tosef on Shvius is also Sakoch, you see, it doesn't stel sich zu to the Iker. So therefore, when you have a Shvius that goes to Shminis, HaKorchach, it's going to be mutter and batul. And Tzorchi and Godel, according to the other Rishonim that learn that the Gemara Shaila is the Gabi Hilchas Bittul, so it's very schwer, the Ran's Kash on the Rishonim. How do you see from the fact that what there was this Tosef on Shvius, it's also who did that when you have a gidul on Shvius that was in Tosef on Shminis, you should not say bittul. So the Stipler answers this kasha with a tremendous yisoid, which you mentioned similar in the Shir Leon Dafn Zayim from the Chazanish, that the Stipler says the understanding in that when you have a Hosafat on Shvius is also is not the pshat because it's not batul and it's midin taruvis of Issa v'heter, that the meat that was nisgadol on the year of Shemitah is also. Rather, the understanding is that since there's a gidul on Shemitah, so therefore the entire pre has now a status as if it was nisgadol on Shemitah, and therefore it's not the pshat that there's a meat that's answering the rest. Rather, the entire pre now has a chashivas as if it grew on Shemitah. And according to this Yisoid, it's miyushav hativ. That the Gemara bring a raya, the gidul heter is mal and it's iser. It's not because of bitter baroiv. Rather, it's a din mesuyim that the entire pre now has a chashivas as if it was grew on Shminis, and therefore the entire pre is mutter. And the Stipler asked, that's still hard to understand. We had the Gemara know that that's the Nakuda, and the reason why it's also is because the entire pre is also maybe just this part that's in the Tosef is also. So Stipler says that since over here we're discussing beer and a chiv to yimafke, the payers of Shvius, that you have a chiv to yimafke the entire pre akorchach. The pshat is the entire pre has the status of the gidul and Shvius. And therefore, it's miyushav hated that the Gemara compares it to giduli hatem malnus iser. And the Stipler says, according to this, it's beautiful that the Gemara brings a raya from this halacha, which is very hard to understand. How do you see over here? We're talking about gedulim. Maybe this price is not talking about gedulim; it's talking about a regular taruvis. And the Ran Bavorins this kasha, and the Stipler says, according to this mahalach, it's beautiful because over here we're mechayiv beer in the tire pre, and that's a korchoch because there's a new halacha that the entire gidul of the pre is meshich shayich to the gidul on Shvius. So that's specifically by gedulim and wouldn't pertain to tataruvis of Issa v'heter v'ayin shamoit. Moving further on, the Gemara brings a raya. The geduli het is malnus Issa from the halacha of Shvius that you have payers of Shvius of a choshud that continue to grow on the 8th year. That it's mutter, and the Gemara says, "Akochi yisig duli hetem balnus is," and the Gemara says it's not a raya because shani shviya since isura de karga, therefore it's batul as well de karga. And the Gemara is a kasha for maaser that you don't say it's b'tilasa de karka even though the isura is de karka. And the Gemara says that the isur maaser is digun hu de gorim and not the karka. The Stipler asks, what's the Gemara's understanding of the Gemara? The Gemara says digun hu de gorim. The isur maaser is not chal through the digun, rather from the kriya shem. So the Stipler says the understanding is according to what's mavur and Rashi in Yevamos Daf Peivov, which mentions Shir in Yevamos Daf Peivov, that says a tremendous hekdish that the Geder of the Isser Chum was not independent Isser, rather it's a chelik of the Isser tevel, and the Isser tevel is because you have chumas and maasers that are mixed up, so therefore it's associative, because the Isser maaser is not holiday kriya shem, it's chal through the digun. And the Stipler asked, it's very hard to understand, what's the Gemara comparing? Shvius to maaser. Shvius is a dovish ein la matirin, so therefore it's batul. However, maaser is yeshta matirin, so therefore haoseres should be batul by yisuya de karka b'teilosai de karka, since it's a dovish yeshta matirin, it can't be batul. So the disciple says the answer is that is halacha of yisuya de karka b'teilosai de karka is not halacha in batul beroiv. Rather, it's halacha b'fnei atzmoi, that since the entire Issa and Shvius was through the karka, so therefore it's nisbatel, and it still to the gidul and shminis, that's maaser the tvua. And since the maaser is not mitzad halacha of batul beroiv, you don't say dovish yesh lamativ and no batul. However, the disciple says it's shver, because you see specifically when there's a roiv that grew on the 8th year, it's mutter. And shver, if it's not halacha batul beroiv, then why do you need the only majority that grew on the 8th year shemevatel that grew on the 7th year? So the disciple says that the head of gidulosei b'karka, mitilosei b'karka, is not a halacha of batul beroiv like in Kol Torah Kula. Rather, it's a din b'fnei atzmoi, that since the issa was chal through the karka, therefore it's batul de karka, but it's only when it's chal upon him chadoshes through the gidul on the 8th year, and therefore specifically when there's a roiv, it's batul, but it's not because you need a roiv to be mashva or batul beroiv. Rather, you need a roiv to make that grew on Shvius into panim chadoshes that should be mutter through that was gidul beheter.